2012. I was in my classroom during the school day. My students were at that time at the round table in the classroom making Christmas tree ornaments when my principal, Chris, popped his head in the door. "I need to see you," he said. He looked really upset. So of course, due to my cautious nature and my Catholic school upbringing, my first thought was, uh-oh, I wonder what I have done. When we got into the hallway, he said, "I'm pulling the teachers out of class to tell them that there has been a shooting at an elementary school in Connecticut, and many little children have been killed. I'm just sick about it. Don't tell the students yet. I'm going to make an announcement a little bit later, but I thought that the teachers should be alerted ahead of time." It was one of those moments where I will always remember where I was and how I felt. I felt just like everyone else would that day. A mixture of grief, fear, and outrage. Who could do such a thing? What is wrong with our government that things like this keep happening over and over? Those poor, innocent little babies. Those poor parents. Every single school shooting is a horror. But there was something even more poignant about this one because unlike the others, the victims in this one were little ones, 6 and 7 years old. It was heartbreaking. As the news spread through the school, it touched each and every one of us. As school professionals, all of my colleagues were touched at a very deep level. We could all imagine ourselves in this position. There were lots of tears and hugs and knowing looks exchanged after school when our principal assembled us all for a meeting to discuss how we were going to address the concerns of our students the following morning. They were going to have questions and fears, and we wanted to be as ready as we could possibly be to reassure them and to make them feel safe. In addition to the many sad, angry, and fearful feelings I had as I headed home, I also felt a united feeling, solidarity with my fellow citizens, that kind of solidarity that the sharing of a common tragedy brings to us. We are all in this together. We all lost children today. We will unite and we will face this together as a nation. As I drove home, I listened to the NPR coverage of the situation, still feeling a sense of shared and universal grief with every single person that I heard speaking. It was the same feeling that I had on September 11th, 2001, and the same feeling that I know those old enough to remember the assassination of President Kennedy felt. I was moved at the deepest possible level by the death of children that I didn't know. And this experience was a visceral reminder of the shared humanity of all people. All children belong to all of us. And whenever any child is harmed, we are all wounded. A bit later that day after I was home, I logged onto Facebook. And as I expected, many people were posting about the shooting. One of my college friends, Greg, had written, "My thoughts and prayers are with the parents who lost children today. They are the true victims of this sicko." In response, another member of our same group of college friends, Nancy, wrote, "While my heart breaks for the parents, the true victims are the 20 little first graders who have had their whole lives taken from them." Poor Nancy. She probably would have been able to get away with this, and she probably could have said it had it not been for one thing. Nancy is childless, and her childless status made her a quick and irresistible target. Within minutes of her post, Greg fired back, "Nancy, of course you don't understand my post because you don't have any children. Until you have children of your own, you Only a parent can understand what these poor parents are going through. Well, I probably should have stayed out of it. But I dared to wade in to defend Nancy. I wrote Greg. I don't think Nancy is discounting the grief of the parents. She's just reminding us that these poor children lost their very lives and that we should mourn what they have lost. Immediately, he posted back, Peter, just like Nancy, you are incapable of understanding because you have never had children. I have a son. You can't even begin to imagine how I feel about him. Trust me, you don't really understand love until you have children of your own, and you could never understand this kind of grief. And Greg was by far not alone. Over the next several hours, person after person excoriated Nancy and I for being childless. Greg is right, Andrea, another mutual friend of all of us, wrote and posted to both Nancy and I. Please know, I love you guys, but neither of you could possibly understand a situation like this because you don't have children of your own. I'm sure you both feel bad in your own way, but your hearts are nowhere near as heavy tonight as all of the parents around the world because we understand love in a way you never could. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just speaking the truth. Andrea got 17 likes for this post. At least 9 other people felt called to berate Nancy and I for our childlessness, all agreeing in some way or another with Greg and Andrea that she and I were unable to grasp the magnitude of what had occurred at Sandy Hook that day, and implying in many cases, and coming right out and saying in a few other cases, that Nancy and I were less capable of feeling and understanding what love really is and how grief really feels because we were childless. As disheartened as I was not really surprised. As a childless adult, I had been down this road many, many times with many people, even with my own mother and sisters. You couldn't possibly understand. You've never had children. This was always my mother's trump card with me, and the one she used to win virtually any argument. It didn't matter what the topic was. Apparently, I used to think reproduction imbued a person with a universal mastery of all things that the childless could not even begin to comprehend. Had I only fathered a child, I used to say to her, I'd have understood everything my mother ever said and did. Everything from why she didn't believe in labor unions to why she always leased a car instead of buying one. Almost any time the topic or disagreement got too heated, she would put an end to it by reminding me that as a childless person, my opinions were naive and my experiences were illegitimate, and that I would just have to trust her on whatever it was because she possessed an innate and superior grasp of reality that I could never even begin to fathom, due to the fact that she had had children and I had not. And as my Facebook encounter showed me, my mother was far from alone. There even turns out to be a name for this phenomenon. It is called childless shaming. I found, as I looked into it, that much has been written on the topic. Childless people are seen by many, it seems, as selfish, immature, and unfulfilled, as if the maturation process is not complete until a person has reproduced, as if the childless live in some sort of perpetual adolescence, as if being childless protects and shields a person from life's harshest realities. This was definitely my mother's view. She often told me with complete sincerity how much she envied me and my carefree existence. The fact that I would never really know true grief or suffering, the fact that I had no legitimate worries or any real significant struggles and never would. This, she would assure me, was a great comfort to her because I was the only one of her children she knew she would never have to worry about, because I had been inoculated against the human condition by my childless status. As mothers, like she was, my poor sisters would suffer and toil as she had, while I apparently floated through life in a bubble of ease and blissful ignorance. Now, in fairness to my mother, I now understand that she was simply acting out of a cultural assumption that is more deep-seated and much more prevalent than I understood at the time that we were having these discussions. That having children was an essential part of living, and that a person who does not have them is not only ultimately unfulfilled and missing out on understanding the meaning of life itself, but also is refusing to do one's duty to one's family, to society, and to the world. It's a common sentiment. And I speak with certainty that those of us who are childless here this morning are probably far more aware of its existence than the parents among us. And I would also guess that all of the childless people here this morning have experienced some degree of childless shaming over the course of their lives. So, how many of you have heard these? You'd be such a great parent. Doesn't your mom want grandchildren? Who's going to take care of you in your old age? Have you ever considered adoption? Now, in my experience, these questions and comments nearly always come from people with children, well-meaning people. And I have also experienced an interesting new phenomenon, by the way, in recent years. 30 years ago, few, if any, people ever probed gay male couples as to why they didn't have children. But in the past decade or so, as nearly every single TV drama features an adorable gay couple adopting children, my partner Michael and I are often the recipients of this question. Are you two going to have kids? You'd make such great parents. What strikes me most about these conversations, especially in recent years, is the apparent obliviousness to my age inherent in the question. A few months ago, we were at a fundraiser at a friend's house, and we struck up a conversation with a woman that we didn't know. After she had ascertained that we were a couple, she popped the question. Are you two going to have kids? Well, I am in my late 50s, I told her, so I think I am a bit old to begin parenting. Nonsense, she shot back. Why, I had my daughter at 39. Babies keep you young. Pointing out that were I to start out now with a baby, I would be about 76 when the child graduated from high school, did not deter her. Oh, you could do it if you really wanted to, she said. She was bestowing upon me the ultimate societal legitimacy by seeing me as someone worthy of parenting a child. And here I was rejecting the gift. She couldn't seem to understand that at all, much less accept it. Nor did she really seem to have any awareness at all that she, a complete stranger, was probing and prodding me on an extremely personal and potentially sensitive issue. Among other things, by the way, I do have a question. Do heterosexual 57-year-olds regularly get encouragement to adopt infants? If she had any awareness of how objectifying and intrusive her comments were, I didn't see any sign of it at all. She proceeded on the topic with a clear sense of entitlement. The sighted person leading the blind. The seasoned club member hustling the uninitiated. The entitled seeking to bestow entitlement. And I can't fault her for this, by the way, because by and large, it is perfectly acceptable in our society to overstep this particular boundary. People do it all the time. As soon as an engagement is announced, it is fair game to ask a couple about their reproductive plans. Are you going to have kids? How soon? How many? Do you want boys or girls? And the degree of intimacy one may or may not share with this couple is irrelevant. It is completely acceptable for perfect strangers to ask these questions. And should the couple reply, as my brother-in-law and his fiancée did when they were engaged, that they are not planning to have children at all, the news is received much like one reacts to hearing of a terminal diagnosis. The immediate assumption is that something must be wrong. People are sympathetic and will usually share the story of someone they knew who adopted and everything turned out fine. But if, like my brother-in-law, there is no fertility problem and it's simply a conscious choice, people recoil in judgment. This couple must be fundamentally flawed in some less than obvious way. Maybe they're not really happy or in love. Maybe it's an arrangement. Or perhaps one of them is horribly selfish. Maybe one of them was abused by their parents. Regardless of the reason, most people's enthusiasm and joy for the couple is diminished as soon as they learn there is no baby on the horizon. After all, it's not going to be a real marriage, at least not a completely fulfilling one. How could it be without so much as the wisp of a hope for children? I mean, why are they bothering at all? Why not just live together? The childless are marginalized in all sorts of ways. It's something that most of us no doubt resonate with, but something that I think is fairly rarely talked about. And although people don't realize they're doing it, childless shaming, I think, is a common experience of the childless. In all sorts of ways, childless people receive messages that we are somehow incomplete, unfulfilled, incapable of fully understanding the realities of life, and immune to true pain and suffering. The people who do this shaming are doing so unintentionally. They are simply following a culturally inculcated script that they've never had reason to question. I don't believe that my mother meant to shame me. She was simply following the script. I do understand that, among other things, parenthood can be an enormous burden and a very thankless job. And I think that what I was hearing from my mother in a large way was envy. The idea that I enjoyed a freedom that she did not. And I understand this part, but I think she went a little too far in a couple of key ways. Perhaps, I've always wondered, because she became an adult at the same time she had a child by getting married and having a baby at 19. She conflated adult problems and responsibilities with parenthood and assumed that childless people just continued to live the carefree existence she was living before she had my sister. She really did seem to believe that childless people had an easier life and that they had a carefree existence. I saw this not only in how she related to me, but how she related to and spoke about other childless people as well. She really did seem to believe that we had relatively problem-free lives. And she really did seem to assume that childless people couldn't really understand adult problems because they were not really adults themselves. In addition to these false impressions, she also never seemed, in my conversations with her, to take into account that childless people were not all happy to be childless, and not all childless people were childless by choice. In an ideal world, I, myself, would love to have been a parent. And I will share that it is a sadness for me that I did not ever have this opportunity. And I will admit that it does hurt at times when this sorrow is used as a weapon against me. It also makes me angry because it is such a blatant marginalizing tactic, a form of othering me. I am less than fully human or less than fully adult, so it's okay to discount me. I can't feel things as deeply as parents do. My life has a little less value because nobody calls me Dad. My marriage is a little less complete because it is childless. I lack a certain capacity for love because I am emotionally immature. My problems are relatively trivial and easily borne because real trouble only visits those with children. My sympathy and compassion are a little less heartfelt and a little less valuable because I am immune from real pain. And my opinion carries a little less weight because I am perpetually naive. These are the real messages behind childless shaming. They are essentially the same messages inherent in all sorts of oppressive messaging. They are meant, sometimes intentionally, often completely unintentionally, to claim a place of privilege over the other and to invalidate the experience or the existence of the other, as somehow this person is less than or diminished in some key way. The politics of oppression are always the same, and the duty of a compassionate faith is to call privilege out wherever it exists, which is why I chose this topic today. So please know that if you have ever engaged in childless shaming, that is not my intention this morning to shame you. It is simply to call your attention to something that if you've done it at all, you are probably doing it unintentionally with no malice and not thinking about its impact. Like my mother, you're simply playing a culturally sanctioned part in the play of life. And I am confident that giving you a little bit of pause and calling you to think about it will shape how you think about this issue in the future. Another thing I will say is that we would all be wise and compassionate to refrain from asking people about their reproductive plans or histories or choices. There are many people for whom having children is not a choice, and there are many people for whom this can be a painful topic. This includes, by the way, I think, delving into the topic of adoption. Like reproduction, not everyone that would like to adopt is able to do so. Whether or not someone has or does not have children, why they may have had them or not had them, is a very personal and private thing. We have no idea what traumatic association we might be triggering when we go there with people, especially with people we don't know well. And I, by the way, will freely acknowledge that there are things about parenting that I will never completely understand. But that having been said, I firmly believe that we all experience love and compassion, struggle and pain, grief and loss, whether we have children or not. Were this not so, then every person who had ever reproduced would be kind, compassionate, dedicated, and hardworking. So think about your life experience for a minute. Is this how things are? Are the people that you know who have had children always wiser, more loving, more understanding, and more committed than those who haven't? The human condition is just that. We all share equally in its joys and sorrows. We are all fully capable of love, and we are all equally vulnerable to pain. As the hymn says, "This is right, it should be so, we were made for joy and woe." All of us, male, female, gay, straight, black, white, abled, disabled, those with children, and those without. We are all fully human and fully valid just as we are. My college friend, Nancy, did end up making some progress with Greg, but it took several years. A year or so ago, when the Me Too movement was in full swing, Greg posted something that got her attention. During the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, Greg posted, "I am no fan of Trump or Kavanaugh. but I'll never understand why women wait until a man is famous to make these allegations. Nancy shot right back. Greg, of course you don't understand because you are not a woman. Until you have a uterus of your own, you really shouldn't comment on these matters. Only a woman can understand what women go through. So I braced myself for the battle of words that I was certain was coming. And I was really surprised when Greg wrote instead, Nancy, point taken. I will remove my post, and I commit to keeping quiet about all of this until the women have their say. You are right. Until I have walked in their shoes, I have a duty to listen and keep quiet. He got 11 likes.